I'm going to talk about the work that I have done during my PhD in last 10 months, which is about explaining deep learning systems by exploring their feature space. As you may know, deep learning systems has become an important component of complex software systems, including image recognition, natural language processing, and autonomous vehicle. And unlike traditional software in which developers explicitly program the system's behavior, deep learning systems mimic the human ability to learn how to perform a task from training sets. For example, in this figure, you can see a self-driving car which takes decisions using deep neural networks. A safety critical scenario in this case would be to decide what to do to avoid crashing with the other car and also take care of the pedestrian which is going to cross the road. In this scenario, the output of deep learning is to brake. But we need to understand to what extent it can be trusted in response to the diversity of inputs once it's deployed in real world, because it could face scenarios that might not be sufficiently represented in the data from which it has learned. So DL testing is essential to ensure the correctness of these safety critical practices. Another important thing is to generating test inputs to test such systems. In the literature, there are a lot of test input generation techniques focused on generating adversarial inputs by adding perturbation to the original inputs. As an example, DL-Fuzz is a differential fuzzing testing framework which mutates the images of digits and add some perturbations by using a fuzzing process to achieve a neuron coverage. And the output of this approach would be the number of adversarial inputs generated by this tool. Deep Janus, instead, is based on the manipulation of the model of input, and it characterizes the quality of the deep learning system as its frontier of behaviors. It tries to find pairs of similar inputs that trigger different behaviors. The output Deep Janus provides is a set of systems frontier inputs and the radius of this frontier. On the other hand, as an example, we have Asphalt, which creates challenging virtual scenarios for testing self-driving car software and tries to maximize out-of-bound episodes. The output of Asphalt is the number of out-of-bound episodes and the inputs that generated by the tool. So we have number of adversarial inputs, we have frontier of radius, and the number of OBs. But how we can understand root cause of misbehaviors from this information? A limitation of this approach is that their output cannot be directly used to explain the behavior of deep learning system under the test. Coverage reports or radius or number of OBs do not provide enough information to understand what input features might have caused the misbehaviors. So here it comes one of the elephants that Paolo suggested, which indicates no approach provides a human-interpretable characterization of the input features that make a deep learning system misbehaves. So our aim is to explore the feature space and provide a detailed explanation on how the system behaves for different inputs. And in order to provide such an explanation, we need to first formulate our problem and define feature maps. Here, when I am talking about feature and feature maps, I mean maps like this. Let's consider handwritten digit classifier as an example. If we want to define a feature map for input of this classifier, a sample feature would be like this. A two-dimensional map, which one of the dimensions is boldness, which indicates how strong the stroke of the handwriting is, and another dimension would be discontinuity, which indicates how continuous the stroke of the handwriting is. And the digits are representative of inputs in the map, and red circles specifies the regions that lead to misclassifications. We can see that bold are hard to recognize as 5, when part of the figure forms a circle, as they can be considered as a 6 or 9. And the bottom of the map shows that the thin and discontinuous figures are hard to classify. As you can see, this feature map helps to explain that which features of inputs are causing deep learning system misbehaves. So one of the main contribution of our approach is defining these feature maps and make the root cause of the misbehaviors for developers understandable. A crucial element of our approach is the choice of these dimensions that define the feature space of the interest. Actually, the features should represent the meaningful properties of the test scenario. To this aim, we propose a novel systematic methodology that can be used to define the feature dimensions in the domain of interest. Our methodology consists of 2 macro steps. One is open coding, which selects the features that better characterize the generated inputs, and the second is metric identification, which quantifies the selected features. Let's see how this methodology works. First, we should run a pilot study in which we define the initial list of features and we label a subset of inputs. If we consider, for example, this image from the image classifier system, candidate features for this system would be boldness and a smooth discontinuity, which I have explained before, and also a smoothness, which indicates the absence of sharp angles in the digits. Then, after defining the features, we assign a subset of inputs to assessors such that each input will assess by at least 2 assessors and labeled. Each assessor independently tags the inputs assigned to them by either reusing an existing feature label or defining a new one. Each feature label is composed of a feature name and paired with the corresponding feature value chosen from a rating scale, usually with the 5 levels. For instance, boldness label will have values that range between -2 and +2, where -2 means very low and while +2 means very high. For example, for this specific image, boldness would be 1 because it's almost bold. Smoothness would be -2 because it has a very sharp angle on the left side. And discontinuity will be 1 because it has a small part of discontinuous on the right side. After pilot study, after we tag the subset of inputs, the pilot is continued with the consensus meeting. In a consensus meeting, the assessors will talk about the labels they have assigned to the images, and also they are able to define new features. As a part of consensus meetings, assessors are allowed to agree upon the additional features. For example, for this image classifier, we have defined another feature, which is rotation of the digit with respect to the vertical axis. And only when a common understanding of the features and their possible values is reached, it is possible to switch the final study mode. In the final study, it is enough that each remaining unlabeled input is evaluated only by a single assessor. Typically, we want to label as many as input it's possible. The second step of our methodology aims to define a set of candidate metrics that can accurately quantify the features that have been identified in the previous step. For example, for the current system, which image classifier, we have these metrics: luminosity, which is the number of light pixels in the image, or average angle, which is the average angle of Bezier curves of the SVG representation of digit; moves, which is the sum of the Euclidean distance between pairs of sections of the digit, and also the orientation of digit. After defining candidates, we are going to validate these metrics with respect to our features. The candidate metrics are then applied to the inputs considered in the first step to select the most accurate metrics for the given feature. We compute the Pearson correlation coefficient and the associated p-value between the manually defined feature values and the values returned by the candidate metrics. And the ones with the highest correlation will be chosen as our selected features. As shown in this table, for boldness and discontinuity and rotation, we were able to define metrics that significantly correlate with the human assessment. However, for the smoothness, which turned out to be both difficult to evaluate for human and difficult to quantify precisely, the correlation value was low. So we discarded it. Also, we have agreement level in this table, which shows that for boldness and discontinuity, assessors were strongly agreed. But for rotation, we didn't report any value because the rotation was defined after pilot study. Labeling procedure is supported by a web application which belongs to Gabriele Babota, but we applied some modification to satisfy our requirements. Using this application ensures that unlabeled inputs are equally distributed among the assessors and enables assessors to label inputs according to the existing features as well as defining new features. After we defined our features, then the next step is applying our approach. But before I explain the approach, let me show you the case studies that we have used to evaluate our approach. The first is MNIST, which is a classification task and consists of recognizing handwritten digit from the MNIST dataset. And it's a DNN that predicates which digit is represented in a grayscale image. And another one is the BeamNG system, which is a self-driving car equipped with a lane keeping assistance system. And the deep learning component solves the regression problem. It predicates the steering angle of the car with the given image of the sensors of the camera. For these two case studies, we have applied the feature selection methodology that I have explained before. These are the features and metrics we defined for MNIST, and also we have done the same for BeamNG approach, BeamNG case study. There are a list of features and metrics. I have highlighted two of the metrics of BeamNG because in addition to the features that characterize the structure of the test input, we also considered features to capture the behavior of the car during the simulation. We use these metrics that have been proposed as an quality metrics of self-driving cars to measure the quality of the driving, which is the standard deviation of the steering angle of the car and also mean lateral position of the car with respect to the center of the lane. Then we measure the correlation between our defined features and metrics, and we choose the ones that have higher correlation as our feature dimensions to generate our feature maps. For generating feature maps, the approach that we have used is Illumination Search. So let's see what is the Illumination Search. Illumination Search is an algorithm which defines a low-dimensional feature space from a high-dimensional input space. Let's consider our two case studies. For example, the image classifier. The inputs are the SVG model of the image, which is generated from the control points. It is the same for the roads of the BeamNG. We define the roads with the control nodes that are the red points in the center line of the road. So for using Illumination Search, we defined features for these input models and make the high-dimensional input space of them to the low-dimensional feature space. So we can have maps generated by the features, and Illumination Search is going to find the best individuals or the best inputs inside the map, which in our approach is the ones that are going to misbehave. We call this type of algorithm an illumination algorithm because it illuminates the fitness potential of each area of the feature space and allows researchers to understand how interesting attributes of solutions can affect the performance of the individuals. Okay, so we have designed our technique based on the Illumination Search. Before I explain how algorithm works, I should mention that we have developed a tool named Deep Hyperion to apply Illumination Search on the feature space of deep learning system. Let's see how this Deep Hyperion is working. For first step, we should initialize our map. We generate a two-dimensional map with two combination of features with size 1, which is empty at first. And the legend at the right of the map shows the value of fitness of the individuals, which darker means that they are misbehaving and that they are better solutions, and lighter means that they are correctly classified or with our deep learning system. The next step is as other search-based approach is generating initial population. First, we generate initial population, and then we measure, compute the value of features for each individual, and we place them in the map. And placing individuals in the map is based on their features and the fitness. The one with the highest value of fitness, which is the one that is misclassified, would replace them with the ones that have a lower value of fitness. After populating map with the initial population, we randomly select one of the occupied cells in the map, and with our mutation operators, we mutate that input. Then we evaluate that mutated input and update the map with the one with the new input generated. As you can see, the color of that cell is changed from the light to dark because after mutation, it causes misbehaviors, and we show the misbehaviors with the darker color. After some iterations, when our termination condition satisfied, which can be runtime of the algorithm or the number of generation, we report the final map, which is a two-dimensional map with features and misbehaviors and inputs generated by our approach and the features of these inputs. So we have an interpretable map, which also we define, we report inputs and their features based on these maps. We have evaluated our techniques with different aspects. One aspect is failure diversity. We want to see how diverse are the inputs that we are generated with the Deep Hyperion. We define two metrics. First is the mapped misbehavior, which is the total cells in the map that contain misbehaviors. I mean the dark cells in the map. And the second metric is the sparseness of these misbehaviors. For sparseness, we use mean of max Manhattan distance between misbehaviors in the map. So as you can, I reported the result for both cases, that is MNIST and BeamNG. In these box plots, the horizontal axis is the combination of features we used, and the vertical axis are the number of misbehaviors and also sparseness of them. As regard MNIST, you can see that Deep Hyperion is performing better in 2 of 3 combination of features we generated. Only for move and luminosity, it has a lower number of misbehaviors, and that's because DLFuzz is applying perturbation directly to the input and may cause the images to have lighter pixels or have more discontinuous parts. So it has more misbehaviors. However, they may be not realistic and valid. Also, the Deep Hyperion generates more diverse and more sparse misbehaviors in all combinations in MNIST. On the other hand, we have BeamNG. As regard BeamNG, the top box plot shows that Deep Hyperion was always able to expose several diverse failures of the BeamNG system. In comparison with the Deep Janus, it produced significantly more misbehaviors for all feature combinations. Another aspect that we want to evaluate our approach was the search exploration, and we want to see how extensively Deep Hyperion can explore the feature space of the inputs. We defined two metrics to this reason: field cells and also the coverage sparseness. As you can see, for MNIST, Deep Hyperion almost always covers more part of the map, and the generated inputs are more sparse. Same for BeamNG. And in summary, we can conclude that Deep Hyperion can always explore the feature space more effectively than the competitors. Another research question, which is the most important part of our research and our evaluation, which is going to answer the first question that I have mentioned about how the features can affect and can show us the effect of the features in the generating misbehaviors. We define this feature discrimination metric, which is how strongly do different combination of feature characterize the failures. We have launched each combination of features 10 times, and in this figure you can see the feature maps where the cell color indicates the average misbehavior probability across the runs, and the darker color indicates higher probability. Blank cells are combinations that have never been explored by the Deep Hyperion, and the cells highlighted with a dark border have a misbehavior probability higher than 0.8, which means that whenever an input is placed in these cells, it is very likely to trigger a misbehavior. As regards MNIST, we can see each feature map produced by Deep Hyperion has multiple regions where the probability of failure is high. For instance, the center map suggests that the left-oriented and thin digits are very likely to cause classification failures. On the other hand, in BeamNG, each of the map corresponding to the combination of mean lateral position and minimum radius has a clear regions where the probability of failure is high. And this suggests that roads with at least a very sharp turn cause the car to misbehave. So based on this map, we can conclude that Deep Hyperion can detect clear regions of the feature space that are likely to expose failures. This was our aim, to have these interpretable maps to find out what is the root cause of the misbehaving inputs for deep learning systems. As a future work, we are going to add diversity to Deep Hyperion, and also we are going to use these feature maps to train deep learning systems to see how differently they can work. And finally, we have this plan to evaluate also Deep Hyperion with the industrial deep learning systems. In conclusion, I have to say with this approach, we are offering the developers an interpretable map which shows that what is the root cause of the misbehaviors for deep learning systems. And besides that, we also propose an approach for finding the more relevant features for each deep learning system. And the evaluation results shows that our approach is working better than the ones in the state of the art. And finally, it was able to generate misbehaviors and also explain what is the features of these inputs that cause the misbehavior. Thank you.